Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video for you. Over the years of World of Warcraft's lifespan, there have been some players or moments that have stood out from the rest, either in a good way or a bad way. So in this video, I thought I'd take a step out of the game for a moment and talk about some of the more famous or infamous players of World of Warcraft. I won't really include YouTube content creators because that's a little boring, I think. Instead, I want to focus on the people who were involved in some interesting or some funny in-game event. People who left such an impression that they have in-game references or items named after them. So, let's get into it. These are the most famous or infamous players of World of Warcraft. Number 1. Gedren the Dwarf and his Dwarven Hand Cannon. Out of boredom, one day Gedren went to go exploring in the deep run tram that connects Stormwind to Ironforge, and he came upon a, interesting scene. You see, Gedren was on a role-playing realm, and he came upon two night elves in the middle of a very special roleplay, Enotep and Artemisa. Hey, nothing says romance like a dark, dank corner of a public transit station. Enotep settles for nothing less than the top high-class venues to engage in cyber-diddling. The hairy dwarf skulked the shadows, assessing the situation from afar. And, seizing the moment, Gedren decided to join in. He emerged from the shadows and interjected himself into their intimate, role-playing experience. He tried his best, but for some reason, he was rejected from joining in. Enotep didn't roll that way apparently, so Gedren quickly retreated into the shadows to watch from a safe distance from Enotep's roaming fingers. But the moment had passed. Before Gedren could even whip out his Dwarven Hand Cannon, Artemisa took her leave. In fact, she walked her butt all the way back to Ironforge. Uber didn't exist back then apparently. Enotep, not too pleased with this turn of events, prepared to take his leave as well. No one stands in the way of a night elf and his E-action. He re-equipped his clothing and verbally bombasted the dirty dwarf for dropping in uninvited. Feeling remorse for ruining the moment, Gedren offered an apology, but it wasn't taken. He had done quite enough, and Enotep walked off into the sunset, never to be seen again. For number 2, we have Karmer the Paladin. Back in vanilla, there was an ability called Reckoning. This would give the Paladin an extra attack on his next attack upon being critically hit, stacking infinitely. A Paladin by the name of Karmer saw the potential in this, and using the dueling mechanic, he stacked Reckoning to an absurd amount to become a weapon of mass destruction. He did this right next to the outdoor raid boss, Kha'Zix, and when he was ready, he charged in and soloed him. A video of the event was released, Paladins worldwide started emulating it, using it to one-shot people in PvP, kill Kha'Zix themselves, etc. Reckoning was quickly hotfixed to only store 5 charges max before more damage could be done, and Karmer as a result became a legend amongst Paladins. Next up, we have our first infamous player, Analog Kid. Drama over loot has never been in short order in this game, but centered around Analog Kid, it reached its apex in the Burning Crusade expansion. He was a rogue in the Vicarious Guild on the Area 52 server. From the Sunwell Plateau raid, the final boss there, Kil'jaeden, dropped the legendary hunter bow, Thoradal the Star's Fury. This was the first legendary item for hunters. It was perfect, it had a slow speed, amazing stats, and best of all, it had its own ammo. This was back when hunters needed to buy ammo for their bows and guns. It was the item, and every hunter wanted it. Well, it dropped for the Vicarious Guild, and one of 2 hunters would be the lucky recipient, or so they thought. Citing that Analog Kid was more loyal to the guild, the item was given to him, a rogue, to use as a stat stick over the 2 hunters in the raid. Remember, this was also back when rogues had a ranged weapon slot and hunters had melee weapon slots. They could equip both, but obviously, ranged wasn't the rogue's primary, and it was just used for extra stats. Word of this quickly spread, and the whole guild and Analog Kid became the subject of ridicule and anger. The ongoing joke in the game was that everything was a hunter weapon. Well, for this day only, this legendary bow was a rogue weapon. Let's take a break from the drama. Next up on our list, we have Indalamar the Warrior of the guild Nerfed. And when I say the warrior, I mean the warrior. Back in the game's infancy during the beta, no one really knew how to play. Everyone quote-unquote knew that warriors were the worst class in the game. They killed things much too slowly and were constantly calling for buffs on the forums and whatnot. Everyone knew they were underpowered, except Indalamar. He called out against these cries for buffs and said that warriors weren't underpowered, but rather overpowered if you knew what you were doing. No one believed him, so he put his money where his mouth was and made a video showing how it's done. He showcased a 3-minute run of him steamrolling through high-level mobs, often killing them in just 2 hits, which was unheard of those days. Back then, the Bloodthirst ability worked much like Victory Rush, where it was triggered off of kills. So he just chain killed an entire compound without having to stop once to heal. To everyone's shock, he was right. Warriors were overpowered. In a storm of people saying that they were weak, he showed that with proper itemization and talents, they were wrecking balls. Shortly after the video was released, warriors were hit with the nerf bat and everyone pointed their fingers at Indalimar as the cause. He was just a little too good and the class suffered because of it. In fact, he was so good that Blizzard hired him as an itemization developer. He's had a few items named after him, Ramaladni's Blade of Culling and Icy Grasp, which is just his name spelled backwards. And even in Diablo 3, you have the Ramaladni's Gift, which gives a socket to any legendary. He also got his own card in World of Warcraft's trading card game. Like I said, he was the warrior. Next up, we have Zuzo and Shax. Zuzo was a rogue in the Method Guild back during the Burning Crusade expansion, and at the time, he gained the reputation of being the most geared. He had the server-first legendary Warglaives of Azeroth, and most of the Tier 6 set. He was a very hardcore raider with the gear to back it up. Well, someone with a lot of money started whispering Zuzo, offering him real-life money in exchange for his account. Zuzo initially refused the stranger's offer, but he persisted, offering more and more money as time went on. The figure eventually reached 7,000 euros, which was nearly 10,000 US dollars at the time. Eventually, something happened with Zuzo in his personal life, and he found himself strapped for cash. So, he finally accepted the stranger's offer. He sold him his Glaive Rogue for 7,000 euros. The stranger renamed the rogue to Shax and got to play for all of 5 days before he was banned by Blizzard. You see, Glaive Rogues were very rare back then, so it was obvious what happened. Zuzo, a high-profile character due to his gear, disappeared, and this new rogue who had the exact same gear as him took his place. And it didn't help that this Shax character was also spectacularly bad at the class since he had never played it before, which was kind of hilarious to people considering he had the legendary glaives. People quickly pieced together what went down, the details of the trade were leaked, and word spread like wildfire. Blizzard quickly caught wind of it, investigated, and dropped the ban hammer on Shax, essentially setting fire to his 7,000 euros. It was such a big event that it was even covered by the BBC, although due to legal reasons, everyone chose to remain anonymous. In a fit of rage, Shax was planning on suing both Zuzo and Blizzard, but nothing ever came of it.
I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating of course, percentage of survival.
Well, that's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums,
ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins!
Oh my god, he just ran in.
Everyone knows Leroy. Being the subject of one of the first viral videos of World of Warcraft, Leroy was a paladin in the Pals for Life guild. The guild was running the Upper Blackrock Spire instance and were coming up with a plan of attack for the next room. While they were constructing a strategy, Leroy came back from his AFK and with a battle cry abruptly charged into the room, guns blazing, or swords blazing rather. He pulled the entire room of enemies and the entire raid was overwhelmed and eventually died. This gave birth to the Leroy term, which is ascribed to reckless or stupid behavior in-game. The video quickly became quite popular, with it even being referenced in the game show Jeopardy! Although none of those filthy casuals knew the answer.
And that would be the World of Warcraft.
Shameful. Blizzard also saw fit to acknowledge Leroy in-game through many different ways. They released an achievement to enter the same room he did and kill 50 whelps. This awards the Jenkins title in-game. And in the Warlords of Draenor expansion, there was an event to where you could resurrect an NPC named Leroy Jenkins who, after a short amount of time, would rush to the end of the dungeon. If you were able to clear before he quote-unquote Leroyed, you got an achievement and you even got him as a follower in your garrison. Truly, one of the most famous players in the game.
At least I have chicken.
The story of Sirak isn't necessarily based around a player, but rather a community manager. The World of Warcraft forums have always been a pretty unfriendly place, but it was particularly bad during the early days when there was less moderation and tools for reporting people. Trolling and flame wars were rampant, and the community managers, or CMs for short, were often the target for players' frustration and rage. Nowadays, for the most part, the abusive posters are either ignored or banned, but back in the game's infancy, the CMs were a little more interactive, with Sirak being the most outspoken. Having been a CM for a couple of years already, Sirak was starting to show visible weariness having to deal with the forum's more unscrupulous users. Instead of simply removing posts, he would enter debates and arguments with these trolls. Some cheered him on and saw him as a crusader of sorts fending off the trolls of the forum, and others were in awe and saw his behavior as rash and unprofessional. It all boiled over one day when Sirak replied to a thread created by someone wanting to know how to report a CM for inappropriate behavior. He gave the avenue to do just that, and jokingly wished the poster good luck in reporting him. Another user replied asking if he was depressed, egging him on, to which Sirak replied that the poster was cowardly because they hide behind the anonymity of the internet, stating that he is the one who quote-unquote steps up. The exchange continued, and Sirak posted the frustration of his job as a CM in the form of poetry. Can't help it, posting impassionately, they say you don't care. Posting nothing, they say you ignore. Posting with passion, you incite trolls. Posting fluff, you say nonsense. Post with what facts you have, they whittle down with rationale. There is no win, there's only slow degradation. Take note, it is the first and only time you'll see someone in my position make that position. You can be me when I'm gone. The response was mixed. In typical fashion, some people sided with Sirak against the trolls, and others condemned his lack of professionalism. And some people were just curious to what the heck was going on. Sirak made another post, venting further about the troubles he faces with his job, how he has to deal with people constantly goading him, deriding him, and so on. After a little back and forth, he dropped the mic with the following quote shortly before the thread was deleted entirely. Understand that this moment will be fleeting, and that there is a hard crash of self-esteem to follow. You'll try to feed it again and fill the void, but it'll never be enough. You've backpedaled into the troll excuse. You have no point, you have no meaning, you have no significance. You will be forgotten. Following this, Sirak made just one final post in response to another troll thread created by that day's drama. It reads as follows: killing a Sirak should aggro every Sirak in a 40-yard radius. It makes sense, you're actually killing their best friend. In a final post, Sirak replied with this. A few days later, Blizzard announced that Sirak had left the company. It's still a point of debate to this day whether or not he was fired or he quit. The following year, another CM, Drysk, was asked about Sirak's fate, to which he responded, "If I answer, you might ask the same thing of me tomorrow." On a lighter note, next up we have Crowler. Every warlock knows who Crowler is. He was a level 11 orc warlock who made quite the puzzling post on the warlock forums. The discussion focused around warlocks and their use of staves. The post contained a 4-step process. 1. Post message in the room. 2. Look it over. 3. Don't report anything, I might get in trouble, smiley face. And 4. Have fun. Crowler himself failed to post any information about his staff, other than the fact that it was quote-unquote a good one, and alluded to the fact that he would somehow get in trouble if people were to report him. Players were left mystified by the post. Some followed Crowler's instructions and posted and talked about their staves, and others flamed him over his lack of sense and poor grammar. Frustrated that some were not following his 4-step process, Crowler posted the following and was never heard from again. The thread quickly reached 100 pages of responses, and Crowler became a legend amongst warlocks. He was referenced by Blizzard in their sneak peek of the new arena system in the Burning Crusade, which featured an orc warlock named Crowler decked out in a full tier 4 set and using a wimpy level 5 staff. He also got his own TCG card when, upon entering play, the player may search his deck for a staff card to look over. Next up, we have a player who had one goal: to be the most hated and most prolific ganker on the entire server. This is the story of Ennui. He was an orc rogue player on the Dethicus server who would head deep into the Alliance territory into Menethil Harbor to kill low-level players, either in transit to other areas of the game or just there for questing. He would spend around 9 hours a day in Menethil Harbor, taking out any adventurer unfortunate enough to enter his sights. He quickly became a legend on his server, even spawning intricate guides on how to avoid his wrath. Naturally, he was met with anger from his victims. At the time, you couldn't have both Alliance and Horde characters on the same PvP server, so people would make alternate accounts to give Ennui a piece of their minds. And he himself made an alternate Alliance character named Ennui Spy on the same realm to goad reactions from his victims. He screenshotted some choice conversations and hosted them on his website as an archive to his in-game antics. I'll have a link in the description if you'd like to see all of them. There are a lot. He's since moved on with his life, but back then he was probably the most infamous rogue not just on his server, but in the entire game. Next, we have the undead warrior, Noctin. Noctin isn't really known for an in-game event. Instead, he's known as being the first recorded recipient of the first legendary in the game, the Talisman of the Binding Shard. This was a legendary amulet that dropped off of the Baron Geddon boss in the Molten Core raid. It had some resistances, strength, agility, stamina, and a Thorns proc. Noctin was the lucky recipient in a March of 2005 raid by the guild Nerfed, the same one Indalamar was from. But the item wasn't actually intended to be a drop in the game. Blizzard just forgot to remove it. As soon as word spread, Blizzard removed the necklace from the loot tables and let Noctin keep his, making him the only person to ever have this legendary necklace.
Odd groups go to left, even groups go to right. That means 1, 3, 5, 7 left, 2, 4, 6, 8 right.
Anyone who's played World of Warcraft knows about the Onyxia wipe animation. The person you just heard was named Dives, Tauren warrior and leader of the guild Wipe Club. On one fateful night, Wipe Club decided to raid Onyxia's lair.
Whelps! Left side! Even side! Many whelps! Now handle it!
Dives was the acting raid leader at the time, and as you just heard, things weren't going so well. They were having trouble killing the boss, and Dives wasn't too happy with the raid's performance. And what resulted was the birth of one of the biggest rage moments in the history of gaming.
That's a 50 DKP minus! What the was that?
One of the raid members took audio of Dives' vexation and made it into an animation that was watched around the world. At the time of this video, the animation has reached over 8 million views and is an example of what can happen when people take things just a tad too seriously. I played just a sample since I want to keep this video PG-13, but if you want to see the whole 4-minute meltdown, I'll have a link in the description. So, that's about it. Those are some of World of Warcraft's most famous or infamous players. There's probably a lot that I missed. Feel free to let me know, and if you enjoyed the video enough, I might make a part 2 to this. Let me know if you'd like to see that. As always, I hope you found the video entertaining, like it if you liked it, and thanks for watching. Peace.